You are sitting in traffic with the engine running and your phone buzzing while your jaw stays clamped shut. Your heart starts doing that thing where it feels way too loud and fast, almost like it is desperate to get your attention. The strange part is that nothing is actually wrong because there is no predator or real danger, yet your body acts like it is just another stressful Tuesday. Something inside you pulled the alarm anyway, and now every system you have is braced for a total impact. What if there is one specific nerve, a single wandering thread running from your brainstem down to your gut that acts as the actual switch between panic and peace? Ancient yogis found this connection thousands of years before neuroscience even had a name for it, and they built an entire breathing system around that discovery. What they were doing back then was not just spiritual decoration, but a precise physiological tool you can use right now with nothing but your own breath. The vagus nerve is not really what most people picture when they think of a nerve, because it is not just a single wire. You should think of it more like a slow highway that branches off in every direction, starting at the base of your skull and passing your ears before wrapping around your heart and lungs. It eventually dives all the way into your gut, which means it touches almost every organ that keeps you alive. The name actually comes from the Latin word for wandering, and this nerve genuinely lives up to that title. It is the longest nerve in your entire body, and it refuses to stay in just one lane. Most people get the mechanics of this backwards by assuming the brain does all the talking and sends every command down to the body. In reality, 80% of the signals on the vagus nerve travel upward from the body back to the brain. Your gut and your heart are constantly filing reports that your brain is mostly just listening to, which is why stress lands in your chest and stomach before you have even had a conscious thought. Your body knew you were stressed first, and it did not wait for your permission to feel it. The vagus nerve acts as the main conductor for your parasympathetic nervous system, which is the side of you that handles rest, digestion, and recovery. Its counterpart is the sympathetic system that handles the opposite feelings of fight, flight, and alarm. In a healthy nervous system, these two sides take turns so that when stress rises and the alarm kicks in, the vagus nerve brings everything back down. Once the threat passes, the problem is that most people living in modern cities are running that alarm on a constant loop. Noise and screens and deadlines create 1,000 tiny threats that never fully resolve, so the sympathetic system stays switched on while the vagus nerve gets quieter and quieter. Your body eventually forgets what it feels like to fully come down from that high alert state. This is not just about feeling a little bit tense, but rather your entire system losing the flexibility it was originally built with. The answer to getting that balance back is older than any pill or wellness trend, and it starts with your breath. Pranayama is usually translated as control of life force, but what those early yogis were actually doing was learning how to drive the autonomic nervous system by hand. They figured out, through thousands of hours of practice and observation, that the breath is the one automatic function you can also control deliberately. Because breathing is directly wired into the vagus nerve, taking control of your breath means you are taking control of the switch that runs your body. Here is where the science gets specific. When you breathe slowly, at about 6 breaths per minute, you hit what modern researchers call the resonance frequency of your cardiovascular system. At that exact pace, your heart, your lungs, and your blood pressure system all start oscillating in sync, and heart rate variability goes up as a direct readout of how active the vagus nerve is. The body moves into a state of coherence, and while the yogis didn't have a word for that, They could feel it happening and built their entire practice around the sensation. The exhale is where most of the action happens. When you inhale, the vagal influence on your heart briefly dips and your heart rate edges up. But when you exhale, the vagus nerve re-engages and applies what researchers call the vagal brake. This is a beat-by-beat slowing of the heart. So if you extend the exhale longer than the inhale, you spend more time with that brake applied. The result is that your body starts reading the environment as safe. Ujjayi breath, which practitioners call victorious breath, uses a gentle narrowing at the back of the throat to create airway resistance. That resistance does something automatic and elegant by lengthening the exhale without you having to think about it. And it also engages the baroreflex, which is your body's internal pressure sensing system. Together, these shifts push the nervous system toward parasympathetic dominance. Science calls this cardiovascular coherence, but most people describe it as becoming both calm and alert at the same time, a combination they didn't realize was possible. Then we have Brahmari, or the humming bee breath. You close your mouth, inhale through the nose, and exhale with a continuous hum that does more for you than it seems. The vibration travels through the throat and skull to stimulate branches of the vagus nerve in the ear and throat directly. Humming also causes nasal nitric oxide to spike, with some research showing an increase of up to 15 times the resting level, which dilates blood vessels and deepens the calming cascade already in motion. Meanwhile, slow nasal breathing creates something in the brain that mouth breathing simply cannot replicate. The amygdala and hippocampus, which act as the brain's fear and memory centers, start to lock onto the rhythm of the breath until their electrical activity synchronizes with each nasal cycle. What that means practically is that the fear circuitry quiets down, not because you talked yourself out of a panic, but because the breath gave your brain a different signal to follow. The modern stress problem isn't one big event, but rather 1,000 small ones, like a notification at 11 p.m. or a crowded subway platform at rush hour. Your body wasn't designed for this kind of load, not because it is weak, but because it was built to respond to threats that actually end. When a predator appears, the alarm fires, and you run or fight, and then the whole system resets once the danger is gone. The threats are small, but they are constant, and your nervous system cannot tell the difference between a work email and a bear. Cortisol goes up either way, and the vagus nerve gets pushed to the side either way. Over months and years, that pattern carves itself into your biology, and the nervous system stops expecting to come down, so it eventually stops trying. This is where the research gets genuinely useful for someone living in a city today. A single session of slow breathing, even one sitting under 20 minutes, reliably shifts the nervous system toward parasympathetic activity. Your heart rate drops, and the vagus nerve becomes more active, which causes that tightly wound feeling in your chest to finally loosen. You don't need to believe in anything for this to work, because it is just physiology responding to a signal it was always waiting for. If you keep up a consistent practice over a few weeks, the changes start to stick. Your resting vagal tone increases, and the nervous system becomes more flexible, meaning it can still fire the alarm when something real happens, but it recovers faster afterward, instead of staying stuck at high alert. Studies using 4 to 8 week breathing protocols show actual changes in how the prefrontal cortex connects to the limbic system. The brain gets better at regulating emotion, not just while you are breathing, but in your daily life. The practice builds the road, and you don't have to be on it for the road to exist. The practical entry point is much simpler than most people expect. 4 seconds in, 6 seconds out, and that is it. That ratio keeps you close to the 6 breath per minute window, and the longer exhale does the work of keeping the vagal brake engaged longer than the alarm signal. You don't need an app or a subscription or a special cushion to do this. You can do it on the subway, in your car, or at your desk before a meeting, where everything feels like it is becoming too much. Brahmari, the humming breath, fits urban life in a particular way because it gives your mind something concrete to follow. Anxiety spirals because the mind has nothing to do with its energy, but the hum occupies it completely through the sound and the physical sensation of the exhale. 5 minutes of that is often enough to interrupt a full anxiety loop before it locks in. You don't need total privacy, just enough quiet to sit with your own voice for a few rounds. This is what the yogis were building. It wasn't a religion or a philosophy or an escape from the world, but a set of tools precise enough to work on the body at the level where stress actually lives. Stress doesn't live in your thoughts. It lives in the nerve, the breath, and the beat of the heart. They called it the stairway because every exhale takes you one step further from panic and one step closer to the version of yourself that isn't always bracing for impact. The nerve was always there, and so was the stairway. You just needed the map to find them. Think of pranayama as the original manual for your body's own reset switch. You take a step with every slow exhale and every hum, building a path that your body eventually learns to follow on its own. It isn't about finding a destination, but practicing until your nervous system remembers the way back to being calm. Subscribe for more guides and send this to someone who needs to escape the noise.